Hi, I'm Ophi YouTube videos. I am a feminist and a lesbian. I make conversational commentary videos about both of those things, and I am joining the war on bisexuals on the side of the bisexuals. At this point in my life, it's not particularly surprising for bisexuality discourse to crop up every Pride. I have pattern recognition. I wouldn't be right so often if I didn't have pattern recognition, and this happens every year. But this year, it feels like it is dressed up in slightly different clothing, and I want to address that. This year's bisexual discourse du jour is a step up from the people who are complaining about the very concept of seeing a boyfriend at a street festival. It's pretending like queer women are harming the community by having boyfriends and doing so during June. I know it sounds like I'm being overly dismissive. People are going to say, it's not about them having boyfriends, and we're not being biphobic. We just have concerns about rebrands and harm done to the LGBT community. But even with all of that, they're still being biphobic because they're using words with full seriousness like harmful and disgusting about people who still very much identify as being part of the queer community. They are saying that these people who are still saying how they are queer are in their straight era and coming out as straight. And they're acting as though they have deliberately abandoned the queer community and begun to spew hatred towards us, when that very much is not what is happening. So I want to start with Fletcher. Fletcher is a queer artist who I've never paid much attention to in the past, and I'm unlikely to start now, if I'm being honest. I have a sudden protective bent toward her now because of some real bullshit I'm seeing her go through, but the music doesn't do much for me, and it didn't a few years ago when I heard Becky's So Hot for the first time. Fletcher has always identified as queer. If Fletcher had previously identified as a lesbian and that was changing, that would also be fine, but it feels important for me to point out that Fletcher, despite being treated as if she has abandoned the gay community, has actually not changed her label at all. Fletcher is queer. She was queer at the beginning of her career with songs that were and still are about women. Queer has been the word that she has used to describe her sexuality, and it's often a word that people who have like a more broad or fluid sexuality are more comfortable identifying them with than more specific identity labels for many reasons, including the biphobia that Fletcher is experiencing. So I think some of the people who are having these conversations are missing something really crucial when they're couching their criticism of Fletcher's new song in a half-hearted acknowledgement that sexuality can be fluid. It's much the same thing as people who have nasty things to say about sex workers, but sprinkle in an of course sex work is real work to cover their ass. Fletcher's identification of her sexuality has not been particularly fluid. She was queer, and she still is queer, despite the fact that she released a song this month as the promo for a new album called Would You Still Love Me If You Knew Who I Really Was. This new song is called Boy, and it is about kissing a boy. And people are mad. People are mad about this to a degree that makes me feel like I'm losing my mind. The criticism takes a few different shapes. One, people who are accusing her of having built her brand on queerness and now abandoning it. It feels like people are really excited to recycle their outrage from Chapel Roan not being adequately political for them on the Call Her Daddy podcast a few months ago to me, but whatever. People are now accusing Fletcher of having intentionally courted a lesbian audience who she is now cruelly dropping and abandoning. Which is just a lie. It's just a lie. Fletcher was not identifying as a lesbian. If a bunch of lesbians liked her work and related to the fact that they were about women, and now they think that every song they previously liked is retroactively ruined because there's also a song that exists about kissing a boy, those lesbians have some things they need to work through. I'm sorry. And not only is Fletcher never somebody who has identified as a lesbian, but Fletcher is saying in press during the promotion for this song about kissing a boy and feeling conflicted about it that she is still very much queer and that will never change. And beyond that, she is specifically speaking out for trans rights and pointing out how trans people are under attack in the United States right now, at the same time as she is talking about her own queerness and her own self-exploration. And two, many people who are making these accusations against Fletcher think not only is she abandoning her queerness, but also that she has launched heterosexual pride merchandise, because she, as pretty much every artist on a label these days does when they put out a new song, put out merch. Here's the thing about the merch, and it's a thing that makes me genuinely furious, because I didn't even notice it on first brush, and obviously nobody making biphobic misogyny slop about her did either. This merch, with the word boy on it, cute little crop tops and stuff that multiple trans masculine friends of mine expressed genuine interest in, is a fundraiser for the Trans Lifeline. So just zooming out here, you have Fletcher not only being openly queer, which she still is, even though she wrote a song about kissing a boy, and it's kind of wild that I even have to say that, but also she's speaking out in support of the members of our community who are being the most actively directly targeted right now. But the discourse about her is that she is causing harm to that community, that she's the one causing harm to that community. The community that she is a part of, and that she is actively raising funds to help as part of this new era that people are saying is her straight era. And 3, the criticism that is being leveled against JoJo Siwa as well. They argue that she is now rebranding into that straight era, that is happening and that it is a harmful thing to do because the gay community deserves a voice right now and representation is so important, and to take that away during these times is so bad and blah, 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 whatever. I want to call this what it actually is, which is a paranoid reading. I think that it is a paranoid reading to see a queer person in a relationship that you didn't particularly expect for them and then twist it in your head into harm that is being done to you, or you being abandoned, or a failure on the part of this celebrity to provide you with something that you were owed. It is paranoid. It's entitled, it's biphobic, and it's stupid infighting that I can't believe anybody has the time to get riled up about. And yeah, I know even just invoking JoJo Siwa is its whole own can of worms. Talking about her could be an hours-long Nuance Corner deep dive, and I'm not ruling that out as a possibility, but it would require more time than I have to commit to addressing during Pride Month, while she is one of the big current biphobia targets, for me to go into a real deep history. And here's the other thing. If the discourse around JoJo Siwa is being purely boiled down into being about her sexuality, which I think it is here, and I can explain, that's how I'm gonna boil it down too. So, much the same way as it doesn't really matter how you may feel about Blake Lively's actions prior to being sexually harassed on a film set in order for you to not believe that she deserved that or the retaliation after the fact, it doesn't truly matter that JoJo Siwa had a reality show that repeated the patterns of abuse and exploitation we all saw her experience as a child in this particular conversation about her. Because the conversation about her right now is actually just biphobia, and nobody who's levying this shit against her particularly needed that excuse. They just like having it. Do you remember last summer when every commentary slop YouTuber made at least 2 videos about JoJo Siwa, and they were like rubbernecking about her rebrand, or the Call Her Daddy podcast episode in The Big Hat, or about her saying cringe shit in the press about how she wanted to invent gay pop? I've said this before on stream, but I very intentionally did not make a video during the JoJo Siwa slop content gold rush for a few reasons. One of which being that a lot of the criticism around her during that felt to me like people who hated her for being young and queer in a way that they found annoying. Think about how many gay people, and maybe even particularly lesbians, you heard saying, "Ew, no, we don't claim her. She's not the CEO of gay pop. She is nothing to us." And try, maybe, to hold that in your head when somebody tries to tell you that JoJo may be peeling back a bit on the queerness in what she's talking about in press is a hate crime against lesbians. Consider if they are any kinder to JoJo when she is decked out in rainbows, because they pretty much never are. I don't think it's a crime to be young, gay, and annoying. I think most of us were. And if you think you weren't, you're probably in your young, gay, and annoying phase right now. And that's also okay. But don't use it to be a biphobic bully online to somebody who's being cringe in a way that you yourself feel safe from accidentally emulating. And it's not just gay people online who are directing this sort of bullshit at JoJo Siwa, pretending like she has claimed to be straight now and projecting as if they know more about her orientation than she does. Imagine dealing with, as we can see laid out also in Fletcher's song about kissing a boy, what I have observed to be a fairly common insecurity in bisexual women of not being seen in your queerness because of a relationship with a man. And you're dealing with that as well as with a woman who has been loudly out and queer, insinuating on a stage at a music festival that you have gone back into the closet and that she needs to drag you back out, when you have said, even at the same time as you were clarifying that you no longer identify as a lesbian, that you are still queer. knowing that that is shitty has nothing to do with whatever other criticisms you may have of JoJo Siwa. It is shitty that Miley Cyrus said that. Miley Cyrus, who I am positive many people assumed shut off her queerness like a light switch while she was in a relationship with a man. And I'm not going over the entire thing because Miley and JoJo have had a back and forth since then, and it seems to have resolved amicably after JoJo, I think maturely and correctly, pointed out how hurtful the joke is. And I just hate it. I just hate it still, though, because Miley, for whatever reason, I think has more authentic bisexual credit than JoJo Siwa, and she's afforded a level of grace for this sort of mean joke. For her turning around and playing out exactly the kind of shit that's been wielded against her, against another bisexual young famous woman. And one who so clearly has admired her enough that multiple parts of her career seem to be kind of based off of how much she admires Miley Cyrus. It's just really sad. Even just in the days that I have been kicking around the script for this video, I've been served multiple rage bait thumbnails on YouTube implying that JoJo Siwa is now saying that she is straight, including a video with thousands of views with a photoshopped tweet putting those words in her mouth in its thumbnail. That's misogyny slop, baby. It is specifically biphobic misogyny slop. And as I said, these things, that in the thumbnail, that has nothing to do with whatever else JoJo Siwa may have done wrong, and everything to do with a weird and futile rage about somebody else's sexual orientation, which I think is bullshit no matter who it's coming from and no matter who it's directed at. The other reason why I did not want to make a video about JoJo Siwa during the Karma Press tour, though, is because it was very clearly just clever PR. It was so obvious to me at the time that JoJo's team was manufacturing a Miley Cyrus-style Can't Be Tamed arc, that it was table setting so that once she eventually wasn't showing up to events in edgy kiss makeup or pretending to chug whiskey from a closed bottle during festivals anymore or whatever, that there could be a whole nother round of press about her changing into another era. And I thought that this was clever, but not clever enough that me pointing it out in a video would be doing anything other than unpaid PR for somebody who clearly wanted people to talk about her. Here's what I want to say about JoJo Siwa and this discourse. JoJo Siwa's intentionally edgy era around the time of her Karma single, when the slop content about her was in high gear, was quite a while after she came out. And so, when I am saying that JoJo Siwa had an intentionally edgy and wild brand that she was leaning into for the past year or so that I agree is now no longer a priority for her in terms of her PR, I'm in no way implying that the queerness itself was part of that, because it wasn't. JoJo Siwa came out long before the forced edgy era, and she came out in a much more low-key way. I think the Karma era forced her into the conversation so much that people who didn't remember her coming out overwrote it in their mind, like that was when she came out, or they really do think that calling yourself a lesbian in public is the same as signing an ironclad contract to never change your mind or date a man, but JoJo Siwa came out in January of 2021. She was openly queer while she was still in high ponytails and on children's birthday party merchandise. It's really important to me, actually, that you understand when somebody tells you JoJo Siwa came out and immediately had an edgy and wild persona that she immediately abandoned only upon dating a man, that they are either intentionally lying to you or that they have misremembered the timeline in favor of whatever sounds good. JoJo Siwa came out in 2021 when they were 18 years old. Just because some people didn't realize they were queer at the time does not mean that the queerness started only when it became something that they were primarily speaking about on red carpets and in their press. And also, JoJo Siwa was very much already coming down from last summer's over-the-top press campaign by the time they even met this guy that they're dating. I feel like it's very clear to me that them even being on Big Brother was a way to try to introduce them more as a famous person and less as the over-the-top stage character they've intentionally been playing into with the big over-the-top costumes and performances. So again, if you actually check your timeline, JoJo's rebrand, even this next one, and the evolution of JoJo's queer identity are actually just two things happening at kind of similar times that are not directly correlated with each other. And there's way more to be said about that whole Big Brother thing, more that can be said about the relationship she's in itself, but I think that it's important to be able to criticize this biphobic rhetoric in a way that doesn't legitimize it. The baggage around JoJo Siwa's current relationship and the most recent one before it, also with a person much older than them who I distrust and don't side with, is irrelevant to what people have to pretend that the larger conversation is, which is all this bullshit pretending like she is abandoning and hurting the queer community. Yeah, there's definitely an In Defense of JoJo Siwa video to be made about how the way everyone talked about the Big Brother thing had me convinced there was actual cheating going on, and that didn't even seem to exactly happen, and about how even if it did, it's so shitty to be mad at one messy young queer person for not being good representations for you to the standards that you've set in your head. One bisexual person being a cheater, even if they did cheat, does not make it so that it's their fault that other people believe that bisexual people are cheaters. Another thing I find extremely troubling is that people are saying JoJo Siwa dating a man after being threatened with corrective sexual assault on Big Brother is bad because it gives people the idea that corrective assault would work. That is not where people are getting that idea from. People already believe that. The people who are going to believe that do not believe that more because a bisexual person began to date one of the few people who, like, provided them comfort after a troubling experience like that. You cannot blame people for their own oppression this way and pretend like you are being progressive. You should feel humiliated with yourself if you think that JoJo Siwa dating a man is doing anything to further the narrative that corrective assault works. That is a bewildering thing to say. Also, let me clarify, this applies just as much to if somebody calls themselves a lesbian and then calls themselves queer and says that they are now dating a man while no longer referring to themselves as a lesbian, they are not perpetuating the myth that every lesbian can find one man. If you find me a famous woman who is claiming that she is still a lesbian despite the fact that she has a boyfriend, and also that all other lesbians just need to find the right man, I will agree. I will get angry right with you. That is not what JoJo Siwa is doing. In fact, JoJo Siwa gets a lot of shit from lesbians for having said, F the L, I'm queer now, which again, I don't particularly blame for when I bet a lot of lesbians were being particularly mean about them being a messy young gay person who probably wasn't actually a lesbian but had every right to identify as such while they thought they might be. JoJo Siwa or any other young queer person trying on the identity of lesbian and then putting it down before they even date a man. Again, I cannot stress enough, for as much shit as JoJo Siwa is getting right now for saying that they are queer and dating a man, they would also get shit if they were saying that they were a lesbian and dating a man. I might even give them a little bit of shit if they were saying that they were a lesbian still and dating a man, but they're not doing that. We don't need to make shit up to get angry about. There is enough going on. There's enough going on. This is like least of our concerns shit, even as a queer community. Embarrassing. I feel it coming already that, as with every time I defend a famous white woman on my channel, people will be annoyed that I even felt a need to comment on this. But I do think online discourse like this matters. I think silly queer infighting like this has a potential to shape how we think of real people, of real bisexual women in our communities who we even may be friends with. I think playing into this kind of rhetoric, even about celebrities who we don't know, can widen an unnecessary but very present gulf that can sometimes exist between lesbians and bisexuals that really does not need to exist and makes me very sad. You do not need to pay any attention whatsoever to the way that these people have rebranded themselves for their new eras. But I do think that you owe them the dignity of at least acknowledging that many artists and celebrities are constantly being hounded to have new and distinct eras with each new release. Like, I seem to remember people complaining when Olivia Rodrigo stuck with purple for her second album because they were hoping for a complete reinvention. I think you owe them the dignity of not fudging the timeline and the facts of the matter to make them sound as bad as possible. One of the ways people are trying to make these women sound as bad as possible is saying things like that Fletcher's song about having fears about how her revelation about her sexual orientation would be accepted, that is completely unfounded and ridiculous. Except there are Reddit threads with angry, paranoid speculation about whether she might have been dating a man from months before the song was released. And the discourse after the song proves her right, doesn't it? How remarkably sad to look at an album from a singer you used to say you loved on the basis of a shared sexuality and answer with a resounding no to the album title's question of whether you would still love her if you really knew her. And also, how remarkably bad you will look if it turns out that there's also some gender going on here. As you may have noticed from me using multiple pronouns for JoJo Siwa, at least one of today's video subjects has already signaled a desire for multiple pronouns, and the other one is releasing boy merch for the trans lifeline. And what you're gonna have to do if JoJo Siwa comes out as non-binary after you got a bunch of clout out of being angry that they were dating a man is, admit that you don't respect that non-binary people are not still cis women if they were assigned female at birth, or admit that you were wrong to be criticizing JoJo Siwa like this. I presented a false binary. Actually, what they'll do is just find the next hate train to jump on and pretend like they never did anything wrong. They might quietly unlist their so-and-so is straight now videos, maybe, or they might justify it the next time that they make a little update video and say, oh, but they are non-binary, and say, nobody possibly could have known, and they were effectively straight then, so the criticisms still hold. But the misogyny slop ecosystem will ensure both that there is always a new target, and also that the video creator's audience never really expects them to circle back and admit to having been wrong. And for me personally and my channel and the kind of thing that I want to do here, I don't think that taking some time out of my Pride Month to call out some obvious biphobia is something that I would ever need to apologize for, even if there are never any future gender updates. Another reason that I think that you can tell that the backlash to JoJo and to Fletcher is generalized biphobia is because this always happens. It happens all the time. It's happening to Billie Eilish right now because God forbid she be seen kissing a boy in June. Discourse around Billie and her queerness has also long been exhausting to me. I feel like Billie has made it very clear that it's a thing she's deeply uninterested in speaking about or providing specifics on. She mentioned her queerness and attraction to women during an interview for Variety, and then later expressed her frustration at being asked about that rather than about her music or her career or anything else the next morning at a red carpet. And Billie has said since that she never intends on speaking about her sexuality again, or about anybody else who she ever dates. Though that hasn't stopped the headlines and tweets and shitty jokes about it being a recession indicator for a queer woman to date a man. All of this makes me think so much of the way that Chappell Roan is treated, how her lesbianism seems like a lightning rod for people to have the weirdest expectations, the tightest morality code, and the absolute least grace and compassion when it comes to her. I think it's okay and normal and so understandable and human to latch onto the celebrities who we see ourselves in. I would obviously be lying if I said that Chappell Roan's lesbianism did not endear her to me in a way that feels special and unique because of our shared experiences. I think it's not just okay, but impossible not to have a special fondness in situations like that. But I also think that then taking that and forming an expectation out of it, where we get somewhere parasocial and entitled, and ultimately somewhere that will make queer and bisexual celebrities who think there may be any remote chance of them dating someone of an opposite gender in the future more likely to reconsider coming out as queer, is not the future that I want. I don't need everybody who's in my community to have the same experience as me. That's not only impossible, but also boring, and it doesn't accomplish anything. I don't experience my sexuality in such a way where fluid is a word that I would ever reach for. My sexuality is very solid, a foundation for so much of what I want in my life and the decisions that I make inside of it. But that's simply not how it works for everybody else. And to accept a baseline where I get to be angry that some queer woman might have a husband someday is to accept a baseline where the experiences and privileges that I have should also exempt me from the empathy of others. And also, on the other side of that, I am myself disprivileged in ways that sometimes preclude me from leaving my house or being very functional inside of it. It doesn't mean that people with a full-time job are oppressing me by working, and bisexual women who have boyfriends are not oppressing me by doing that either. These famous people's experience of their queerness has nothing to do with yours. It cannot take yours away. It cannot change yours. And if you are picking up much more than solidarity and shared experiences, you're probably inferring and expecting way too much from a stranger. And actually, fuck it, because I've already brought her up. A lot of people are doing biphobia but against a lesbian at Chapel. they will invalidate her lesbianism, say that because some of her songs are from when she dated men, or because she speaks about having had a boyfriend, or just in general because she's currently too loud about her lesbianism, that she must be covering for something. And the argument is not usually that she's fully straight, because it's a lot of other gay people who are doing this to her sometimes. It's that she's some kind of sneaky bisexual stealing lesbian valor. And I think that that is such an enormously unhelpful way to speak about anybody, about somebody who has remained solid in their identity as a lesbian like Chapel Roan has, or about somebody who used it as a temporary and transitional label like JoJo Siwa did. I'm speaking entirely as a hypothetical here and not because I think this is likely to happen. If Chapel Roan did discover that she was queer or bisexual and no longer identified as a lesbian, it would not mean that she had been lying to me. It would not take away the fact that there had been a huge lesbian pop star when I was in my 20s who sang songs about her lesbianism. Just like Fletcher writing a song about kissing a boy does not take away from the fact that she was singing and writing fuckboy sapphic songs about women and will likely continue to do so in the future. But most importantly, not only would it not take away those things that Chapel has provided to me, it also, if she changed her sexuality, it would not have any impact on mine. Not even the parts that I currently feel like I share with her. It would have no impact on my experience of the world, on the decisions I make or will make, and it would likely have absolutely no impact on the way that I was treated on the basis of being a lesbian. I don't think that a lot of these people who are having these high expectations of perfect representation and stuff, and that people will only enter into queer couples, understand what an unreasonable expectation they are placing on a real human being. In fact, I know that they don't understand what an unreasonable expectation they're setting when they want somebody to be a perfect role model, because they let any hesitation they feel about what they're saying be swept away with a quick, and this isn't biphobic. But, like, I really feel like it is. Because dating is not activism. One of my lovely Patreon friends put it that way in the comment section of my research video over there for this one, and I loved that phrasing. I think it ties so well into the things that we discussed in the video I made last fall with my friend Trash Discourse about lesbian separatism and 4B, which you can find linked in the description below if you haven't seen it. A lot of people missed that one, I think. But dating is not activism. Queerness is political, but that does not then put somebody on the hook as if they are your elected political representative and it's their job to represent you in the way that you find most radically queer. These same people shitting on her now were most likely saying just last summer how JoJo Siwa doesn't represent them anyway. And as they're getting super angry at JoJo and Fletcher for not being lesbians, they're not even noticing the way that they themselves treat the lesbian pop star Chapel Roan. Because lesbophobia is biphobia, is misogyny, is transphobia. Please do not listen to lesbians who tell you that they have a right to be biphobic because they're lesbians, because it's not the rest of our fault that they haven't unpacked that shit, but I hope that they do. This all comes from the same struggle, and parsing out that lesbians are more oppressed than bisexuals, so if a bisexual is bisexual and not lesbian, they're not as queer. That is stupid. It's stupid. I'm sorry. You might just need to hear somebody say it's stupid, so I'm saying it's stupid. Now I need to calm myself down because I want to say thank you to my lovely Patreon subscribers, a few of whose names you can see on the screen right now, for the lovely discussion for this video and their help in pulling my thoughts together to be able to talk about this. Patreon's a great way to help support me financially, and you get a couple extra videos from me a month. This month we are having lots of discussion posts for upcoming videos because there's so much going on. Get on in there if you want to know my thoughts on the new Sabrina Carpenter album before that video comes out. Thank you so much to my Patreon subscribers, my YouTube channel members, to anybody who's done a one-off donation via Ko-fi or by super chatting me on my live streams. It makes such a huge difference, and I'm so grateful that this gets to be my job. Also, like, I do want to talk more about gay discourse, and I do want to use my position as a normie lesbian who doesn't hate bisexuals for good, so we will speak more about the war on bisexuals, I promise, both when it comes to bisexual men, as well as even more ways that it is an amplification of misogyny when it's wielded against women. But that's a bigger conversation than I felt like I could put out within this month, and I knew that the discourse being so present this June was likely bothering a lot of you about as much as it was bothering me. So I just wanted to talk about it. Thanks for letting me. I love you. A special Pride Month extra love you to the gay people in my audience, including the bisexuals, even if you have boyfriends. I'll be back soon. Bye.